Hello everyone, my name's Bill Press. I'm a technical specialist in component design at Rolls-Royce, and today I'm going to outline a strategy we've generated in Rolls-Royce in order to provide a through-life justification for the use of additive manufacture technology in the production of two components that make up the manual glow valve.
And hello from me, my name is Dr. Gary Jones. I'm Head of Manufacturing Innovation within Rolls-Royce Submarines, and I'll be talking about some advanced manufacturing technology we're developing at the moment under a project called Project FAST. That's Future Advanced Structural Technology.
Okay, so we're splitting the presentation into two. I'm going to go first with the additive manual glow valve. So just a little bit of background to the application. So we have three sizes of manual glow valve, 15, 25 and 50 millimeter nominal bore, which are fitted to a number of fluid systems on each platform. The valves are generally used to allow flow or isolate flow of the fluid systems during the full range of plant pressure and temperature cycles. So the two components that we're applying the AM technology to are the body component, shown there in blue, and the bonnet component in green. Both of these are manufactured from 316L stainless steel, with the bonnet screwing into the top of the body and welded via a toroid canopy seal. The body component incorporates the valve's main seat, produced from Tristel 5183, which provides a system isolation when the valve is closed. And then the bonnet incorporates the valve back seat, again produced from Tristel, which provides isolation of the valve internals when the valve is open. The disc is then manually moved from one seat to the other in order to provide the required system isolation. What's important to note around this application is that the valves are classed as high production volume within the business, so there's more than 100 units per platform. As stated, they withstand the full range of pressures and temperatures of the plant system, so they're part of the full pressure boundary. And they're also classified as safety critical, meaning that if one were to fail, it would require the initiation of another safety system in order to prevent the risk of plant failure. This really takes the application of the AIM technology well beyond just tooling or support structures that we've previously used it for within the business. So a little bit of background around the current method of manufacture. So step one, we take a large rough machined initial billet of 316L material. Step two is then to produce the Tristel insert. This is made from metallic powder that is hot isostatically pressed, hipped into bar form and then machined into the insert. Step 3 and 4 is around producing a stainless steel plug, which is then used in step 4 to encapsulate the Tristel insert into the wrought body. This then goes through a second hip cycle, which actually bonds that Tristel to the 316 material. Step 5 is around machining the internal profile of the component and including the main seat. And then step 6 is around the final machine of the external form. And this same process is used for the back seat when we're producing the bonnet component as well. So what are the issues with this method of manufacture? Well, so the mass of the initial forging is around 10 times that of the final part, so we have a significant amount of material waste. In step 2, there's a long lead time in terms of production of the hip insert. And step 3, the stainless steel plug is not actually part of the final component and therefore is 100% machined away. There's a cost in terms of cleaning and welding of the parts prior to the hipping process. And then, as mentioned, there's a significant time and cost for the actual machining stage and producing the final part from the billet. So how does the AM method of manufacture differ? So again, we start off with stainless steel and Tristel metallic powder produced within our supply chain via gas atomization. This is sieved then to the specification powder size requirement. We then start the build with the Tristel inserts, and these are built on stainless steel discs using laser powder bed fusion additive manufacture technology. These are then cleaned, packed, and stored for later use. We then build the stainless steel body or bonnet component using, again, laser powder bed fusion technology up to a midpoint just above the location of the actual insert. We then pause the build and evacuate the powder from the insert location, leaving an inbuilt recess. We then take the previously produced Tristel insert and position it in the build with the stainless steel disc uppermost. We then continue the build process over the insert, encapsulating it in position until the final near-net shape valve body or bonnet component is formed. Material control samples and hip bond specimens are also built on each build plate for later assessment. Once the entire build plate is complete, this is then removed from the machine and is put through a HIP cycle, which ensures a number of key issues. So the Tristel insert is bonded to the stainless steel. It also ensures that the Tristel material is fully consolidated, providing final material properties, and also helps to remove any in-process residual stresses. Post this HIP heat treatment cycle, the material control samples and the bond specimens are tested in order to confirm a successful production, and then standard production and inspection methods are applied to produce the final components. This slide gives some illustration of the AM method of manufacture. So from left to right, we have the initial Tristel 5183 insert built on the stainless steel disc. We then see the valve bodies built up to the midpoint where we pause the build and evacuate the powder to reveal the insert location. You can then see the loaded Tristel insert in the body. And then finally, once the build is complete, the valve bodies are removed from the machine along with the control specimens, and the complete build is then passed through the HIP cycle. So once the method of manufacture is established and the application is chosen, how do we get buy-in from the business and the customer to invest in the novel technology? Well, we developed a business case. So this is not solely based on cost reduction and lead time improvements. We also took into account a number of additional benefits. One of these being the additional quality assurance provided by the process. So we accept the metallic powder before it comes into the business, and as well as accepting every build plate with examination of the material control samples and the hip bond specimens. Also, the choice of the materials will allow us to exploit the technology further, as they cover a broad product range within the business. So once we establish an operational baseline, we can then look to exploit the technology further and expand on the number of applications. Also, as Rolls-Royce are leading the implementation of the AM technology, it allows us to share our understanding with other parts of the Rolls-Royce business and our key partners across the enterprise. And then finally, obviously, using novel technology, it promotes innovation. So we've got a number of patents being filed just on the manual glow valve application itself. Something important to note at this stage, as this is the first application of this novel technology, we use a strict staged approach. So there's no change to the design configuration or geometry of the parts, no change in the material types, and no change in the product finish. So all the component surfaces are 100% machined. So we're working from a known baseline with the technology when it goes into service, rather than having a new design, new materials, and the new technology all at once. And then, as I say, as we get an operational experience and confidence, we can start to really use and exploit the technology more, push the design and actually design for additive manufacture. So how do we go about providing a robust design justification for the introduction of the novel technology, noting that this is the first pressure boundary application on a safety critical component? So we set out the justification around 4 independent legs, principally based on the TAGSI methodology. So that is the Technical Advisory Group for Structural Integrity, which the method was originally set out for an achieving an incredibility of failure type argument, which isn't required for the manual glow valves. But we've used it as the basis for the methodology, really to provide what could be termed a beyond code case for this safety critical application. And the 4 legs are made up of design and manufacture, so the major input being from the technology itself and development of the method of manufacture. Leg 2 is around functional and performance testing. So testing we've done on the material and the components during the development phase, and then also once the parts are in production. Leg 3 is around failure analysis, stress, fatigue, defect tolerance assessment. And then finally, leg 4 is forewarning of failure. So this is looking at the through life aspects, failure mechanisms, and any sort of in-service testing and inspection requirements. So the presentation now goes on to expand on each of these 4 legs. So, as expected, with the introduction of a new and novel material production method, we've carried out a significant amount of materials assessment and testing on both the stainless steel and the Tristel materials. So we've not got time to go through this entire package of work in detail, but some of the key points are, so all the materials were tested in the final condition, so post the HIP cycle. We tested a number of different material batches in a number of different test orientations, all with the intent to demonstrate that material properties were equal to or better than the current wrought material specification. So in terms of mechanical tests, we did tensile, Sharpie, hardness, fatigue, fracture toughness. Metallurgical tests included chemical analysis, grain size, cleanness, macro, microstructural analysis, also looking at the 316 to Tristel bond line in detail, and also corrosion testing, so stress corrosion cracking, pitting, crevice, and intergranular cracking. All these assessments really looking at the material behaviour and looking to understand if it has similar characteristics to its wrought equivalent. So some of the key findings, the material has directionality and is anisotropic, as you would expect from a layer-on-layer build type process. All mechanical properties of the 316 material were equivalent to the wrought specification. However, we did see a slight increase in proof stress, which you can see on the slide in the top left figure, comparing the data in red against the data in yellow. In terms of grain sizes, these are a lot smaller than the raw equivalent, and the grain size is consistent throughout the part. And also from a potential start of life defect aspect, the sizes are very small. This is principally due to the powder particle size that we specify for the metallic powder, and also through the application of the HIP cycle, which we know consolidates porosity, voids, and linear lack of fusion type defects. One of the key concerns around the AM technology is the in-process residual stress and the effect this can potentially have on the start-of-life material properties. So we performed contour residual stress measurements taken directly through the center of the valve body, including the valve seat, which was an area of concern. And this confirmed really there was no significant residual stresses remaining in the final part after the HIP cycle. We also, as you can see in the figure on the right, purposely introduced a defect in order to understand the residual stress effects from a lack of bond on the external surface of the component. And we also saw a surface effect on the upper section. believed to be due to the sectioning and measurement method applied. So still on leg one, in terms of non-destructive examination, the current process, the 316 forge bar and the Tristel 5183 hipped bar are all examined using ultrasonic inspection techniques, using standard methods against code requirements. However, with the additive manual glow valves, this introduced the requirement for a radiographic post-hip cycle inspection, principally as a result of the near-net shape of the parts, and also from analysis of the potential start-of-life defect sizes and their forms. So in order to understand a little bit more about the potential defects, we had an expert elicitation exercise, which included company experts local within Rolls-Royce, and then also the wider academia, in order to understand and agree the potential range of start-of-life defect sizes with this particular method of manufacture. These are then used to guide the inspection techniques to apply, and also the acceptance criteria for these inspections. Something to worth noting is that as confidence grows in the technology and its application, we are looking to exploit the AM further with the use of the through-process melt pool monitoring that the machines offer, and hopefully use this to eliminate the requirement for traditional volumetric examination methods. Obviously, with then the cost and timescale benefits. Finally, in terms of leg one, we also carried out a number of trials reviewing standard production methods, including weldability, reviewing weld width to depth ratios, and also trials both on automated and manual welding of canopy and fillet welds. All trial welds were assessed via mechanical properties, microstructure, and corrosion resistance, all with the expectation to confirm that the existing weld procedures remain suitable and can be applied without change. Also, as part of this leg, we also confirmed that the material performs as expected when applying traditional machining, grinding, and plating methods, and the results were equal to its wrought equivalent. Just moving on to leg two. This is around the function and performance of the body and bonnet components and when built into the valves, really to confirm that they're suitable for use and will operate successfully for the full lifetime of the plant. So, as well as the sort of extant testing methods that are applied to the current components as part of production, such as component hydro tests, valve seat checks, hot and cold valve testing. We also specified tests that sort of go beyond the code requirements, if you like. So we also undertook a ultimate hydrostatic pressure test, an endurance seat performance test, looking at wear of the seat, a shock test, and also a thermal fatigue test. So the next few slides just expand on these tests. So in order to explore the sort of full pressure capability of the AM components, we carried out what we expected to be an ultimate pressure test, really in order to initiate failure, and this was on both an AM valve body and a wrought valve body, really to enable a level of comparison between the two manufacturing methods. So we designed a pressure test rig to go well beyond the design pressure of the components and apply an increasing internal pressure at stages to the blank top bodies. And this rig was able to go up to around 2,000 bar. So we're really trying to blow up the valves. What we found was that both valve bodies retained the full pressure without failure, just experiencing a level of permanent deformation, which you can see from the image on the right there. You'll notice that the AM valve had slightly less deformation, which we believe was a result of the slightly enhanced proof stress properties that we previously discussed. During each test, we also took strain gauge measurements at 2 locations that proved both materials and material manufacturing methods had representative strain rates against the increase in pressure range. So in order to test the integrity of the valve stubs and the valve seats against dynamic type loading, we also carried out a series of shock tests on full valve assemblies welded to pipework and mounted on a 2-ton test platform. 3 different test orientations, again both with an AM and a wrought valve in order to provide direct comparison. And we applied approximately over 150 G to the arrangement during each test, with the valves water loaded and set in the closed position, as with the majority of the valves in service. What we found was that all valves successfully passed the pre and post functional checks. No deterioration of valve function in terms of seat leakage. And we also closely examined the valve stubs, looking for any signs of distortion or cracking, and none were apparent. Finally, in terms of testing, as a further test of the AM valve's integrity, we specifically looked at defect initiation and crack growth, and we carried out a thermal fatigue test on 3 of the manual glow valves. Again, 2 produced from Additive Manufacture and 1 from wrought, which were welded into a U-shaped test train, also along with 2 AM pipework tees that we're looking at for a future application. So in support of this test, we carried out an ASME 3 Appendix 2 assessment, specifically to work out the load-ins for each of the thermal cycles and also the number of cycles to apply, to ensure that we significantly exceeded those experienced during plant operation. And this was really up to a factor of around 10. The test train was then fitted to a rig, which had a hot loop and a cold loop, which could be valved in and out of the test train almost instantaneously in order to introduce the thermal cycles a number of times. So the ASME acceptance for this test is that no through-wall defect is generated throughout the test. However, we also paused the test a number of times just to check the valve's functionality in terms of seat performance. Again, all valves successfully passed this test. Just moving back onto the justification legs. Leg 3 is all around structural integrity analysis that's been carried out on the valve design. So the current manual glow valve has a significant amount of analysis from static stress, fatigue, dynamic shock, etc. And again, we don't have time to go through this analysis in detail as part of this presentation. However, we do point out the approach for this leg is that we don't repeat all this analysis due to the introduction of the AM technology. So we use the material test data generated in leg 1 to confirm that all the materials inputs are still relevant and not undermined. And then we also use the results from the functional and performance tests undertaken in leg 2, just to provide further assurance that the design and we actually saw this from the tests we carried out in terms of the ultimate pressure test, the shock test and the thermal fatigue test. Finally, leg 4 is all around forewarning of failure, and this is centered around the in-service operation of the valves and the through-life support required. So we currently have a failure modes and effects analysis for the valve design, which reviews all the potential failure modes through life. And again, the intent really is to use the work carried out in the other supporting 3 legs to prove that there's no additional failure modes from introduction of the AM technology. As with the current manual glow valves in service, we carry out inspections looking for evidence of corrosion or EAC, and a number of the valves are removed and sectioned in order to assess the valve seats for evidence of bond line corrosion. And check the condition of the seats through life. This approach isn't going to change for the AM valves. Those in-service inspections will remain. Just to note, there has been a suggestion to review the requirement for additional volumetric NDE in service. We are looking at options of how we could do this, maybe remote RT or phased array UT. However, we will need to develop an alarm case for inclusion of any additional through-life work packages, really just to understand the benefits the inspection will give us against the detriments, the cost, time, working way, the shutdown of the plant, etc. So this is the final slide of my presentation. It's really summarising some of the key points that we've learned from introduction of the technology, the AIM technology, really centred around how this can support the structural integrity of a design. So in terms of material defects, we've said the sizes are limited principally by the powder particle size, but also we know the HIP cycle that we introduce helps to limit and reduce porosity, lack of fusion type defects. In terms of residual stress, again, the HIP cycle reduces any in-process stresses produced, and also actual use of the AIM technology can allow us to remove traditional welding or joining methods that could introduce residual stresses into the design. In terms of material microstructure, as we said, the grain size is reduced. We go from ASTM3 to around ASTM5. The microstructure is consistent in complex forms, and also the materials seem to have good cleanness from the controls we apply to the initial powder production. In terms of material properties, we've seen the properties from the stainless and Tristel are generally consistent with those from their raw equivalent. And also the properties are consistent even in complex forms. In terms of quality assurance, again, we get additional assurance from the powder before it comes into the business, and then also tests from every build plate with the examination of control samples and HIP bond specimens. And then finally, NDE. So we are looking to move away from traditional radiographic inspections and apply in-process monitoring using their technology to help reduce costs and timescales. And also the NDE is aided by the actual material itself with the small defects and the material microstructure. That really draws a close to my presentation. Thank you for listening. I'm now going to pass on to Gary, who will provide presentation on some interesting work we've done on a HIP vessel. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, just a reminder, as it says on the slide, my name is Gary Jones, and I'll be talking about HIP replacement, use of low alloy steel powder in high integrity pressure vessel manufacture. There's a tongue twister for you. Okay, first slide. So HIP, or hot isostatic pressing, has been used as a manufacturing process by Rolls-Royce to produce a number of components to date, such as valves, pipeworks, pump casings, and there's a couple of examples on that slide there, both being stainless steel, one a piece of pipework and a pump casing. Fairly large components, but well established and used in production. Things to consider regarding hot isostatic pressing. The austenitic stainless steel components that we've produced to date have a fine homogeneous grain structure and also isotropic properties. That's quite a contrast to the different structures you can find via more traditional methods such as forging and casting, which arise from the method of working or how the grains have grown during solidification via those processes. The results obtained via the HIP give you an improved material properties in terms of finer resolution of the microstructure, and that's been proven out via ultrasonic measurements. HIP process also allows components to be manufactured at much nearer net shape This is a great move for manufacturing. It reduces the amount of waste and also processing time when you can get much closer to the end form. A little slide there which shows a few pictures, and this is all about kind of Project FAST, which I explained earlier, is Future Advanced Structural Technology, and this is a project we've launched with support from BEIS, Business Energy Industrial Strategy, UK government, and we're performing the work in a collaboration with the Welding Institute in terms of electron beam welding, and the MTC, near net shape manufacturing. They're kind of the HIP experts on the HIP process. And what we're looking to do is look at new alternative methods to forging and casting and arc welding processes, and move into additive processes using hot isostatic pressing combined with fixed section electron beam welding. So at the bottom there of the slide, there's a little timeline. So to the left-hand side is some small-scale previous work we did at Rolls-Royce to prove out the process on a billet or small component level, hipping the material that we're interested in, which is 508 forging material or 508 powder. In the middle there, between the hashed lines, that is the work content that will be delivered via Project FAST. And a small vessel next to the mannequin in the middle shall be the world's first hipped and EB welded pressure vessel. During the latter stages of the project next year in 2021, we'll start to produce vessel straights or sections of a larger pressurizer type vessel that we'd look to produce in FAST Phase 2, which we hope to bid for very soon. The small vessel demonstrator, that's the vessel that's in the middle of that chart. So there's a little diagram there to the right hand side. What we've done is jam-pack that vessel full of all different types of features that you would likely see on a nuclear pressure vessel. And that will be subjected to a suite of pressure and thermal cyclic tests aligned with ASME requirements. And that will help us to demonstrate and validate the use of HIP and EB welding to produce vessels. The reason we put lots of features on there is to really test the process and explore the boundaries to make sure it's capable of producing the extremes of geometry that we could possibly need. And the second bullet there just covers the fact that each stage of the project will have material samples and prolongations, and will continually generate material property data to substantiate this new process or new application of process for pressure vessels. Key things to consider with powder then. There's a little image on the left hand side there, but we've done quite a lot of work previously and also more work recently on the quality of powder. The quality of powder into the process is paramount to getting a good product out of the process. Particular things that we need to control are oxygen content and the actual morphology of the powder itself. So the morphology needs to be right, because the critical point here is how you fill your canister. So you need to get uniform powder flow, and you need to get really good packing within that canister so that your HIP process gives you a high quality part at the end. We must avoid heavily satellited powder particles. So you can see on the left hand side there a number of little satellites around a particle of powder. They can cause the powder to be sticky and not flow freely, and then you can have issues with packing density. which downstream can give you an issue with the consolidation of your actual structure. Delivery of powder is also very important because delays in delivery or supply would impact your vessel delivery times. So you can either produce a lot of it ahead of time, but then you've got to store it. You've got to store it in a very controlled atmosphere, or you can bring on the supply chain, as we've been doing, working with strategic partners, so we can pull the powder as we need it in a more of a just-in-time type setup. So powder is key. Brief summary of material property results then. On the right hand side of it there is a graph of energy over temperature, and you can see on the plot we've got a line for forging typical properties and then some dotted lines on 508 kind of requirements for nuclear and what we can achieve to date via the HIT structures. So we can meet tensile and Charpy impact values. They're also equivalent to forge form for tensile properties, and the HIT material has been shown to meet ASME, although comparison to equivalent forge shows we've got a reduction in impact energy. We believe we can improve those characteristics, and again by further oxygen control during powder manufacture, further controls and tweaks on the manufacturing process from filling through to packing through to the HIP cycle itself, we think we'll improve Charpy impact energy results up to equivalent to forging. Conclusions then of my brief summary of Project FAST. We've been manufacturing pressure boundary components using HIP very successfully to date, and now we're looking to move to more large-scale components. Using HIP as an alternative to forging has many advantages in terms of cost reduction, rate reduction, and much reduced amount of waste because we can achieve much nearer net shape. Powder manufacturers are key, and powder control is key in able to achieve quality product out the end. So good in, good out philosophy to be followed. And to date, we've shown that the HIP material can meet requirements, but via further refinement, we think we can improve Charpy impact toughness to the forge level. And just to kind of make it abundantly clear, oxidation of powder needs to be fully understood and controlled if you're going to achieve toughness and the required material properties that you need for nuclear components. Very exciting project, quite a move away from traditional processes to give us some real advantages for nuclear pressure vessel manufacturing and also the wider nuclear component manufacturing by moving to the additive HIP process and EB autogenous non-filler welding processes. That's it for this section. So I think now we are going to move into the Q&A.